Cool. Hello, everybody. My name is Kyle Thompson. Welcome to Incident Response Reimagined here. And then my name is Kyle Thompson. We're going to be going through this webinar with Mr. Lopez and then also Mr. Todd from RSM. Before we get started, I want to do some quick housekeeping here. We'll provide the recording for today's webinar shortly after. Feel free to use the question box in your viewer console to ask us questions throughout the webinar, to add context to the conversation, just keep it open. And for more resources on this topic, you can also check out the resources panel and your console as well too. So today you'll have myself, I'll be the moderator from HYAS. My name is Kyle Thompson. I'm one of the channel partnerships and alliances individuals over at HYAS. So I specialize in building partnerships and alliances for HYAS. I'm located out in SoCal. I started my career out as a SOC analyst within a smaller MSSP out in Proficio and started growing my career up into a channel role over here at HYAS. And then we have Adam Lopez. Adam Lopez is actively at HYAS working as a director of solutions engineering. He's got a similar background as me. He started out as a SOC analyst over at an MSSP and then grew his career into a director role over here at HYAS. He actively has a master's degree in cybersecurity and leadership management from University of San Diego and spent about the last 5 years in the solutions engineering role focused on managed service offerings. And then we got Todd Willoughby. So Todd Willoughby brings over 17 years of experience specializing in information security, incident response, threat hunting, and cyber intelligence operation. Todd is presently a director inside of RSM security, privacy, and risk practice and oversees all of RSM defense cyber operation teams across the United States, Latin America, and India. So prior to RSM, Todd led other global MSSP teams and deployed his skills across numerous industries with a focus on federal clients such as the U.S. Department of Defense, U.S. Army and Navy, and then also the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. So our agenda for today, we're going to be going through an introduction of Protective DNS to start things off. Then we'll lead to using Protective DNS for digital forensics and incident response. We'll run through some case studies with RSM and how we can go through that with HYAS Protect. And then we'll lead off with HYAS Protect as in why we'd want to use that solution and then also why utilize RSM altogether. And then we'll end everything off with a Q&A session. So with that, I'll pass over the mic over to Adam Lopez, who's going to do an introduction to Protective DNS.
Thanks, Kyle. We're going to dive deeper into what Protective DNS is in terms of its enhancements to your cybersecurity posture. But first, let's level set on the solution itself. So Protective DNS is a pivotal component of your cybersecurity infrastructure, or should be, and it's not just kind of a filter in a sense of being able to block what's good and bad. Really, it should be looked at as a comprehensive solution that seamlessly integrates into your network to offer real-time defense against cyber threats. Whether it's stopping malware in its tracks, or preventing phishing attacks, or even identifying unwanted content, Protective DNS kind of provides that transparent layer of protection. Its ability to give improved visibility into your network and potential threats allows for swift action. So being proactive is definitely one of the cornerstones of what a Protective DNS solution should provide. So as we dive in deeper, we're going to talk about some of the kind of the value adds and how to look at Protective DNS when it comes to your own security stack, and also when you're talking about or looking to utilize Protective DNS as a foundational component of DFIR, such as how RSM utilizes Protective DNS with HYAS in their DFIR services. Next slide, Kyle. So when we think about Protective DNS in cybersecurity, it really should be the cornerstone of foundational components. DNS being a foundational component of the internet in and of itself, really kind of points to a security control that can add value right out of the gate, specifically around ease of use and deployment, but also the visibility that it provides based on the fact that, every device, every communication starts with at least one DNS query. So as you can see, early detection and widespread detection, whether you're on or off network, it allows for a remote first organization or a hybrid organization that has employees both in an office and remote. It provides that ability to provide protection whether or not you're on or off network, and being able to continuously monitor at the DNS layer is a vital component of any security stack. Another value add, or as we look at it from a cybersecurity perspective, especially nowadays, is cost of security programs in general. Budgets are tightening. All security teams are being asked to do more with less. And it really is a very cost-effective security layer that you can add to or augment your current kind of network stack from that security perspective. And then lastly, it also adheres to and ensures specific compliance standards, whether or not you are beholden to various requirements from a federal perspective or just an industry perspective based on your vertical. But it can provide that layer of compliance or adherence to compliance when it comes to policy enforcement and what have you. So we're going to unpack some of those benefits later on in some real world use cases. But let's dive into kind of the digital forensics piece as well, and get some feedback from Todd as well in this space as we move forward. So when we think about digital forensics or utilizing Protective DNS in digital forensics and incident response, we kind of have to first understand, or at least discuss DFIR in general, as the space is always changing, just like cybersecurity. But we'll dive in here with first just about digital forensics in general. So, when you think about DFIR, whether it's mean time to detection, mean time to response, identifying, investigating, really trying to understand the threats that are emanating from client networks or your own network. Having the ability to detect, analyze, prevent, and also mitigate threats that are active on a network is crucial to limiting damage and making sure that you have all of those specific elements in place to be able to properly mitigate and recover from specific security incidents. So I'm going to ask Todd here to kind of elaborate maybe on his perspective on DFIR in general. I know he has a lot of experience in the field, and also oversees that service and practice from the RSM perspective. But Todd, can you provide just a little bit of color on kind of the importance or value that you see in operating a solid DFIR program?
Yeah, Adam, especially when it comes to, and thanks for having me on this here today, folks. When it comes to using Protective DNS as far as DFIR, right, there's a lot of components that go into DFIR and the steps and tools that are needed. But Protective DNS, at least how we use it here, is really a first line, right? Easy to deploy, quick to deploy, which we'll talk on that here in a second. But usually before we can get some of our homebred tools or off-the-shelf tools into client environments to either stop the bleeding, understand the scope and size of an incident that we're working on, we can get Protective DNS measures deployed in really seconds, especially just by going in and changing forward lookup resolvers on client networks. And it's that quick, right? That easy. We usually then follow that up with some sort of agent-based approach from the Protective DNS side from HYAS to get more details, especially around what machines are making these calls, things like that. But if we can start, per se, sinkholing that traffic leaving those networks that we believe are under some sort of attack or active incident, we get those results right away and start either passively listening to what's going on in the environment, who this client is potentially talking to, right, what infrastructure they're talking to as well. And we're actively going in and starting blocking and kind of stopping some of that proverbial bleeding right away using blocking modes and things like that. But yeah, that's really where we see the value in it. It's easy to deploy and it's cost effective, as Adam alluded to as well, too, comparatively to some of the other tool sets that are in client environments today. it's relatively light on the wallet per se. But it gives us good data, right? It gives us good data to not only look through indicators of compromise and what we may be going through, potentially increasing or reducing the scope of investigations as well. We'll touch on that here in a little bit in some of the case studies that we're looking at, as well as, the longer we leave it in there, it gives us some historical analysis to not only look through it in the consoles or into an offboarded system and through an API integration.
Great. Thank you, Todd.
Yep.
Next slide, please, Kyle. So we think about kind of HYAS Protect, or the protective DNS solution we're talking about, really is based off of domain-based intelligence, which we'll talk to a little bit later as well, especially around some of the use cases or case studies that Todd just mentioned. But what does a protective DNS solution entail, or what should it have in terms of offerings? A lot of historical protective DNS solutions were basically filters, right, or DNS firewalls, if you've heard of that term before. So utilizing a list of kind of known bads, or having a correlated or aggregated list of different types of threats, whether it be a phishing feed and a malware feed and other sorts of feeds that are then curated and utilized within a filtering of allowed or deny type of lists. And really where the industry is moving to, and where HYAS Protect is really on the forefront, is providing that real-time analysis based off of unique threat actor infrastructure information. So being able to understand what a domain or a resource on the internet is associated with, not based off of, hey, it's been on this list before, or it's been seen in VirusTotal, but really more around, the elements of the DNS query itself, and understanding what's tied to that specific domain from a registrar perspective, from a name server perspective, from a record IP address perspective. So utilizing a threat actor infrastructure telemetry to analyze in real time and use analytics across a number of elements within that DNS query is really where HYAS Protect looks to focus to stay ahead of threats, whether they're unknown or known. And so, we also look at the ability to often, stop threats or attacks before they happen. So our perspective is, threats are going to get in, and I'm sure that Todd would agree with me on this. Threats are going to get in, but what do you do to stop them? How do you see them going out? And so mitigating any further damage, or any, or stopping that malware from talking to C2, for example, is definitely something that HYAS looks to accomplish and continue to innovate on with the HYAS Protect platform. Next, please. So when we look at the architecture of how we deploy, a couple of key components that HYAS looks to bring to the protective DNS market is providing a solution that is easy to deploy, easy to manage, and easy to integrate. Todd alluded to, easy to deploy in terms of, a DFIR engagement where they need to spin up a client in an hour or two. Being able to point, recursive DNS to our cloud gives them that visibility almost instantaneously. So as you can see on the left-hand side with different, for example, different corporate systems, we have an agentless and an agent-based approach. The agentless approach can be a number of different flavors, whether that is an integration with an existing endpoint or EDR solution, such as Defender for Endpoint, or like a SentinelOne, or as a recursor, as we just mentioned. Either of those agentless options would allow us to capture that DNS telemetry, which can then be forwarded to our cloud instance. One for simply the recursive DNS resolution, but also for the security elements and telemetry that we layer on top through the HYAS engine. So in that middle there where you see the HYAS eyeball, that represents our HYAS engine, which is doing the analysis of all of those queries that are hitting our resolver. And then from the right-hand side, interaction with the telemetry itself, whether it is via the UI or through REST APIs and integrations with other security solutions like a SIM or SOAR and things of that nature. So from the agentless side, again, could be a hybrid approach with a resolver or a EDR, which we're essentially making best use of an existing security control in an EDR and grabbing the telemetry from those solution sets themselves. Well, we also do have an agent-based approach. Todd mentioned that as well, whether it's a leave behind after a DFIR engagement, or maybe a hybrid approach where pointing traffic from corporate resolvers, as well as deploying agents based on where they might be located and whether or not they're maybe work from home, for example. But as you can see, the agent there is compatible with Mac OS, Windows, Mac OS, iOS, and Android, and performs that same functionality of being able to forward traffic to our resolver by default over DOE or DNS over HTTPS, and then the HYAS engine providing that analysis once again. So definitely easy to deploy in terms of the different solution sets that are available from a implementation perspective.
And Adam, real quick, we do use a myriad of these deployment methods in our DFIR engagements, right? Obviously, the quick way, if we need to get into an environment right away, within minutes potentially, changing the forward resolvers or the recursive DNS is pretty easy to do. But we also do, we're a big SentinelOne shop over here, but we do also have clients that have Defender and other EDRs that, especially through the Defender graph integrations through HYAS, as well as SentinelOne's Cloud Funnel. We use all that, especially clients that are agent sensitive, I'll say, in order to tie back into those environments for more detailed analysis around the DNS queries that are going in and out of those environments.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Todd.
Yeah, and then the mobile agent too, right? More so, that's not typically something we deploy out in a DFIR scenario, but we've actually used this in other situations where clients are getting push notifications to their phone, as well as clicking on links in email, stopping business email compromise, right? A lot of that stuff takes place from mobile and remote workforces today. That agent has also been very helpful in stopping some potential phishing compromises, as well as business email compromise attacks that we've seen out there on numerous occasions. So covering those myriad of attack surfaces has been very useful with the HYAS Protect DNS product.
And becoming more essential as we see it decentralized, organizations every day, more and more every day.
Agreed.
Great, Kyle. Next slide, please. Cool. So I'm going to continue to pass it over to Todd here for a couple of use case studies around how RSM has really implemented and utilized HYAS Protect for some of their engagements.
Thanks, Adam. Kyle, if you just jump ahead one slide here, we'll jump into the first use case. We're going to go over 2 use cases here today, both of them from real incidents that we've worked on fairly recently here, as you can see by some of the dates. But the first one here, this was for a US-based retail client. And we've seen an increasing, I don't think we are unique in that sense of using that royally, but threat actors using legitimate tools to maintain persistence access, right? This one here being Splashtop. We've seen Altera being used, TeamViewer, things of that nature. And in this particular instance, this client, we had an understanding that they did not use Splashtop in the environment. When we seen these queries going out, we knew that something was awry here immediately. And what we ended up coming to find out is, especially the clients that were making these calls were previously also thought to be unaffected or out of scope, which we quickly learned that we needed to expand our scope for this incident and dig in deeper here. The other thing that we saw that was interesting comparatively to some other of these remote desktop tools that we've seen is whatever binary that was used or installed on this this incident or this attack was communicating to non-US based infrastructure, as well as you see here the AREC belonging to France. That was another giveaway because we knew the client had no business relationships, no dealings with, especially any territories outside of the United States. So those were obviously other red flags. And you can see here that we'll dig into this here too, kind of some of the FQDN, you can see how that's green, because HYAS is theoretically allowing this, right? This is a legitimate tool. Like, these are legitimate tools that are used in environments every day for legitimate business reasons. But the fact of, one being the application, two, the threat actor who we were known to be dealing with, these tools have been used in places like Black Matter, Ryuk, Fin7, Storm, right? Type of threat actors and ransomware engagements to maintain persistence access. We knew that this was obviously abnormal activity, and then we had, on top of that, this stuff was all blocked here. You can see we have some pretty customized rules that the HYAS engine allows us to create when we deploy out. That's another thing that's great, is we don't have to go recreate rule sets when we deploy for clients. So if we know clients are in certain geographical locations and they don't have business relationships in there, we can quickly exclude countries or infrastructure that they should or should not be talking to as part of those initial deployments. And it's very quickly here, you can start seeing that items that we previously thought were out of scope were in fact in scope, and they were using these legitimate tools to maintain access to the environment that otherwise would have probably gone undetected to some degree. So this is great detection here by HYAS, especially with some of the custom rules that we're able to create here, looking for non-US based infrastructure using legitimate tools that is being used as a wrap. Kyle, next slide. And this is just digging deeper into that same detection that we made. There's a couple things on here that are interesting to highlight here. One is the tags, right? We can start tagging these for traffic, especially our analyst team that's been monitoring these. They go in and tag these as potential items to then feed down to the on-site or remote DFIR teams that we have looking at this. And you can see the reason, right? The rule set is an A record block for suspect traffic to non-US countries, right? This client operates strictly within the United States. As well. And we can see here the query timeline, also very helpful, that you can see that this activity was persisting for quite some time. We can get an average of how long it's doing it, beacons per day type of thing, especially if we have some slow and low malware in the environment. We can start mapping and graphing those queries out to track that behavior and identify those anomalies as well. Adam, I don't know if you want to touch on the rule sets or the reasons here, but there's a very powerful piece to the HYAS Protect ecosystem here, is that rule sets and the engines and how it does the scoring and how we write the rules, right?
Yeah, absolutely. From an analyst perspective, being a former SOC analyst, these are the types of flyout panels that I wish I had, only because it really provides you a lot of that context of where to maybe pivot next. So, I'll touch on the kind of the decision engine and the reason verdicts in a second. But one thing I wanted to highlight is you'll see a lot of those, A records or name servers or whatnot in blue. And one of the things that I love is being able to pivot into those additional IOCs or indicators kind of, natively from the flyout panel itself. So sometimes as an analyst, you might, see something that you recognize from a previous investigation, or, hey, maybe I want to go see not just how many times that domain Slapshot has been associated with traffic or queried, but how many times have we seen that A record IP? Because should we be looking at anything else? Or maybe there's a time frame when we can identify, let's go back and look in our logs at this time because it seems to have started right around this time. So really, really useful information in being able to pivot in a lot of those different areas. But coming back to the kind of the decision engine in that first circle on the top left there around reason and reason factors, HYAS really has 4 detection mechanisms. One is the decision engine itself, which is native out of the box. Todd mentioned it, right? Normally, the decision engine would say, hey, that is a legitimate application, right? Or maybe the host name is trusted. And really that is meant to take a lot of the heavy lifting off of organizations or SOC teams in terms of tuning rules. But as Todd and the RSM team utilize some of the other detection mechanisms to tune the engine to their specific use cases. Now in a DFIR engagement, you may have to be a little bit more stringent, a little bit more aggressive in your rule sets because you're fighting or dealing with an active threat, an active attack, which is what the other elements or other detection mechanisms let you do. So as you can see there, a rule set. So we do have a policy engine that allows you to generate some pretty robust rules off of different indicators in that DNS query, whether it be an A record, a name server, a registrar, a query type, right? maybe it's an MX record that you want to look for in a rule set. And then another decision or mechanism for detection is our list management, right? So another piece of that is, legacy solutions do have list management features in order to kind of be in parity with some of those older solutions and make sure that some of our clients are being able to utilize things that they're used to. We've added that in there as well. And sometimes, right, you just need a simple block or allow. And we know that's going to happen. But utilizing that decision engine is really where the bulk of the heavy lifting comes from, based on the analytics in the back end that we touched on earlier around kind of the domain-based intelligence and utilizing it to wrap it into the other detection mechanisms. So I think we have
just to expand on some of that too, like just giving clients here some examples of use cases that they can create with it. Again, it's very powerful, very extensible. You can go, frankly, you can turn HYAS on and it does a great job by itself, like out of the box, right? But you can extend on that, right? Looking for things like abnormally long domains, or especially with high levels of entropy in the domain name or subdomains. A lot of NX domain requests or returns from DNS servers. Anything looking at mega hosting websites, things that were commonly used for exfiltration as far as threat actors go. Remote access software, which we just saw right here, we look for those things. Things like even in the DNS TXT responses, we've seen in the past IEX PowerShell commands in those as well being used for command and control as well. Either the engine is very extensible to look for a myriad of things that you can dream up as that you would want to see and block in real time, right? So it's very powerful, very extensive. Kyle, you want to jump to the next use case here? Awesome. This one's a little bit easier, and it's a little bit more, I would say, what we typically see. So this was for a Middle Eastern professional services client that we engaged with, and we had to HYAS deployed out to the entire engagement, right? And we kind of got everything under control. And typically what we see is threat actors, especially when clients have information they want, they just don't give up right away, right? This threat actor then, which we had previously ridden from the environment, attempted to gain access back to the environment through the same vector they gained access to the environment in the first place, which is through phishing. And here you can see, and actually this particular one, it was the same user that caused the first incident, also caused, I would say, the secondary incident, but then HYAS was in place and it effectively stopped this communication from happening for reinfection purposes, right? So we can see here this client then clicked on a phishing email that resulted to this domain here. The domain was created 2 days prior, which we were engaged in this for a week or so previously. So you can see that they were trying to regain access to the infrastructure by phishing operation again. Actually, the same user clicked on the event again, but this time HYAS was in place, and then they effectively, based upon the domain age alone, this is again something that HYAS does out of the box very well. We didn't have a rule for this particularly, right? This is something that the HYAS native engine, the 4 detection methods that Adam was talking about, really kind of saved our bacon here and blocked this communication outright from the initial click. So this is very good detection and potentially stopped a reinfection from the environment, which we were in the process of cleaning up.
Just like that.
Adam, I don't know if you want to touch on this here, but this is this is another tool that we use from HYAS Insight, which is really the threat intelligence side, I'll call it, of the Protective DNS stuff. But again, you can see here this domain, obviously, not only did HYAS block it based upon its age, right, outright, but it's also being tagged as malicious as well. There's other previous historical domain activity through SSL certificates and passive DNS records and registrations on here that have been malicious in the past. Adam, you want to highlight on some of this here? But this is very useful here as far as helping with investigations downstream.
Yep, absolutely, Todd. Yeah, and when I mentioned earlier around utilizing a number of different threat actor infrastructure telemetry, this is kind of a glimpse into some of that. So as you can see here, this is actually on the A record IP address that it was resolving to, right? So not only are we looking at telemetry and historical data from the domain itself, but also, what does the A record say, right? So as you can see on the screen here, looking at what other domains have resolved to this A record IP address in passive DNS, correlating that against, as Todd mentioned, SSL certs, or if we have any other telemetry on those specific IOCs, that can give us or it can raise or lower our confidence levels in saying, hey, even though maybe that domain had never been seen before, or it isn't on VirusTotal, or it's only been around 5 or 6 days, we can say with a level of confidence that it's probably going to be used for X, Y, or Z based off of some of this telemetry that we then aggregate together and use to provide risk verdicts on whether or not you should be generating traffic to those specific domains. So while this is another separate solution from HYAS, it is used to drive that decision engine that I mentioned earlier around HYAS detections out of the box. So there's a lot more that goes into this, obviously, but maybe we'll do another webinar someday with the insight piece. But this is just a glimpse into some of that telemetry that is utilized for the decision engine and the risk-based verdicts that we provide through HYAS Protect. Cool. So we're gonna now pivot into or transition into just a little bit about why HYAS Protect and then why RSM. Kind of that partnership that we've built over the last year or so, which continues to grow and get stronger. But we'll dive into a little bit of the essentials here around HYAS and RSM. So from sorry, this is Todd, so I'll let Todd go on this first. But yeah. I don't want to speak for RSM. I would probably do it some injustice there. So go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. So a lot of people don't realize that RSM is in this business, right? And that's okay. And that's what we're here to help educate people on. But RSM is traditionally a large tax and audit company, right? Similar to those, the other big fours as well. But we do have a very sizable security, privacy, and risk practice. And I think some of the reasons why we make a lot of these solutions here and investments in technology, especially around some of the highest products as well, is that we have the people on our team. That's really what makes us a big differentiator, in my opinion, compared to some other MSSP services. I am not in the business, or we are not in the business of potentially kicking alerts over the proverbial wall to clients, right? We want to find real detections. We don't buy tools just for the sake of buying them. We buy them to integrate them. All of our tool stack is completely vertically integrated with one another. So we're really trying to drive detections and expertise around, a couple different areas. One, we have a very large threat intelligence component on our team. We have people doing dark web investigations, things like that as well as doing 24/7, 365 security operations. We have a global footprint of SOC analysts around the world doing not only detection and response efforts, but we have a whole threat detection and engineering team, as well as threat hunting teams that are constantly trying to be proactive. And this is where the highest products help us do that in being proactive, right? We want to know what infrastructure our clients should and shouldn't be talking to, and HYAS does a great job of helping us do that. And I think another thing that makes us great is, we're scalable to meet clients where they're at today, right? Some MSSPs handle very large clients, some handle very small. We're kind of in the middle. We handle both, right? We have clients that have 5 endpoints, and we have clients that have 40,000 endpoints, right? We do a fantastic job of partnering with clients to figure out where we need to meet them and where they're at in their security journey and what they want to accept in their risk appetite, and advising them in the correct direction. The other thing I think makes us a formidable force in that regard is, outside of my team, which is our RSM defense team, inside of our security, privacy, and risk practice, we have practitioners that are doing cloud security audits, and particularly around very, tailored technologies. If you want somebody to come in and do a cloud audit for you, a cloud security audit on Azure, GCP or OCI, we have clients and teams that are doing that every day. We have experts in those industries that are able to configure those solutions to the where they need to meet the organization for their security postures. I'm kind of spoiled in that sense. If there's an AWS log out there that we don't particularly know what it is or how to ingest it, well, I got a whole team of people that are able to do that for us. So I'm a little spoiled that way. But that brings together the entire solution of RSM and RSM defense, right? We have people, we have a DFIR team. It's all in-house. It's not outsourced anywhere. And again, we have the luxury of relying on those expertises to make our detections and detection and response activities even more valuable to our clients at the end of the day. And again, just ending it off, right? We want to be a partner, just not a vendor. We have our own security stack tools that we like to deploy out, but we're a complete open, say XDR shop, right? You want to bring your own EDR, you want to bring your own tools, bring it on. We are agnostic in that sense of what data and telemetry we bring in, but as long as it's the right data and telemetry, I think we can meet clients where they're at now. They're not pull out solutions and recommend vendors, but make sure they see the return on investments that they initially made on those technologies. So I think that's why we make a great fit, and that's why I think RSM Defense differentiates itself in the industry today.
Great. So in terms of HYAS, or why HYAS Protect, and we talked a little bit about this, or a lot about this today, around the differentiation within the protective DNS market. But really, HYAS, we are DNS experts, whether it's from the infrastructure side, in terms of understanding what's out there on the internet and how that all relates to communication, or from the network protection of a protected DNS solution. We are experts, and that's what we look to, or that's what we strive to accomplish in terms of innovation and kind of that next layer or that next version of whatever protected DNS might be. But we don't just tout it ourselves, right? We understand that you can only get so far by saying you're the best, and so looking for third-party validation, whether that's from partners like RSM, who have been great to work with and alongside with, or with like our recent AV testing from last year that basically says that HYAS Protect blocks and identifies a high number of threats, and not only just for a protected DNS solution, but when measured across the industry with its competitors. Again, from our perspective, we want to look at the problems that are continuing to burden organizations, and look to do things a little bit differently. Whether it's being recognized by the NSA or CISA around a protected DNS solution that is that meets the needs of those organizations themselves, those three-letter agencies, or looking at some of the solution sets we have out in the market and that are being used by two of the Fortune 500, or the Department of Homeland Security, or what have you. Really, HYAS looks to attack problems differently, and in a similar sense to what Todd mentioned, looking to be a real trusted partner and not just another vendor. And I think we see that with our partnership today, and hopefully we continue to grow that. But again, looking at real world problems and how do we solve those in different ways, because I think we can all agree on security and the problems that we face, that they're not going away. They're just changing and evolving like they have always been. And so looking at new ways to view the same problems is really where HYAS aims to be innovative, or from that perspective, be innovative and continue to push the ball forward.
And Adam, real quick, I think you and Kyle can attest, right? We're not sometimes the easiest partner to work with, but I think that's a testament of HYAS, right? There's things that we need changed in the product, things that we need done for whatever reason we're doing them for, and you guys consistently deliver on those things for us, right? That's something that a lot of other vendors don't do from a purchaser standpoint, right? HYAS has been fantastic to work with.
So yeah, well, before we jump into a little bit of Q&A here to wrap things up, we'll just kind of recap or provide you with some final thoughts on maybe some things to take away from the discussion today, or just to start thinking about in terms of your own security program or solution set, but as well as if you're ever in those situations where, God forbid, you need a partner like RSM to come in and help with a DFIR incident or engagement, or just in general around protective DNS. A couple of things that I like to touch on is, when you're really starting to evaluate the different solutions you have, and from a security stack perspective, and where you may have gaps, or where you may have overlap, or where should you kind of provide, look for a defense in depth approach. Again, Protective DNS is often overlooked or is highly overlooked. One, because DNS has been around forever, right? I mean, the internet relies on it. But two, there's so many new kind of, bells and whistles and flashy new terms for everything in the security industry that everybody's on to the next best thing. And sometimes, right in front of your eyes, you've got a plethora of intelligence and analytics that is just going to waste because it's not being used. So one thing that I would mention is, and hopefully that you took away from this discussion is, if you didn't see the importance or didn't feel like Protective DNS had an important role in kind of the foundational component of what a security program and especially in DFIR can offer, I would encourage everyone to continue to educate yourselves and just maybe revisit some of the use cases that Protective DNS can really solve for. But also, hopefully some of the use cases or case studies that Todd went through kind of highlight just how easy it can be to simply just gain that intelligence, that telemetry, simply by deploying a Protective DNS solution, but also what a true proactive solution looks like, right? Being able to go and stop either an active threat, as he mentioned or showed and highlighted in the case study where there was maybe initially what they thought was out of scope was now being attacked or being targeted, or just simply being able to validate that you're actually stopping the threats you're supposed to be stopping. Can be a huge value add and just a leg up in terms of what you're being asked to do for your own organizations. And so those are just a couple of things that I hope you take away. But Todd, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that or anything you might want to just leave here as a final thought.
Yeah, there's a plethora of use cases for it, Adam, as you mentioned, right? I think just touching back on some of those, right? Malware and phishing. Phishing is still continuing to be the number one infection vector on our attack surface across organizations today. Even though we've had phishing solutions out there for the last 20 years in IT, right? But it is extremely effective at doing that, especially again, phishing leading into business email compromises, another billion-dollar industry there. For threat actors, it's done very well at that for us as well, especially for, we talked about some of those mobile and remote workforces places, as well as integrations, right? We have clients, again, like everybody has different levels of, I could say, agent sensitivity, using the existing APIs that are already in place or existing technologies that are already in place to then leverage these products like HYAS Protect has been immensely valuable for us, right, as far as making detections and then integrating that back into either our SIM or pushing threat intelligence that we're pushing to our SIM, then into HYAS, right? There's a bunch of use cases there and how we use that interchangeably, right? It's been a great tool.
Great.
Perfect. Thanks, Todd and Adam, for the discussion today. I thought it was pretty valuable, and I'm pretty sure the audience thinks so as well, too. So let's wrap things up with a Q&A session. We got some questions from the audience today. I'll go through it and then feel free to chime in, Todd or Adam, as you see fit. So the first question we have is, Protective DNS isn't a new concept. How do you see the role of domain-based intelligence, such as that offered by your solution, evolving over the next few years to address emerging cyber threats? And that one seems to be more geared towards Adam.
Yeah. Thanks, Kyle. Good question. Yeah, and I kind of mentioned that in the final wrap-up slide, right around, DNS is not new. Protected DNS has been around a while. But again, we see the same problems still occurring, right? We still see, I won't quote it because I don't know the stat off the top of my head, but somewhere around, 80-something% of all cyber threats still includes some level of DNS communication or use of the DNS protocol. So it's not going away. And as cyber threats evolve, I see it likely expanding to incorporate more of the, unfortunately, the advanced kind of AI, machine learning, predictive analytics that we're seeing the industry move to. We'll have to, I hate the buzzwords, right, of AI and machine learning, but if every type of security control or solution doesn't adapt and innovate to where we're seeing the industry going, and a lot of times that's based on what threat actors are using, right? How can we stay ahead of the game? Then I think we're going to fall behind. So innovating using predictive analytics, but also and using some advanced automation to be able to respond and provide faster response times to threats, I think is going to be where we're seeing the industry kind of move from a protective DNS perspective. I also see some convergence in the near future of DNS, right? Protected DNS with other network telemetry. Not to hint at what HYAS is looking into in terms of R&D, but having an agent on a box and being able to see DNS telemetry. Well, what if we map that or mirrored that or correlated that with some NetFlow data or other network telemetry that now we can use to be more effective from a protective DNS solution? So using other network telemetry to enhance the outcomes of protective DNS, I think is where we're going to probably start seeing a shift in the industry.
Perfect. Thanks, Adam. Next question from the audience. Are there any best practices or recommendations for organizations looking to maximize the benefits of protective DNS within their security operations? And Todd, it seems to be more geared towards you.
Yeah, I think, look, I mean, this solution, right, or protective DNS in general, it's not even the HYAS Protect thing. It does a very good job of tackling what I would call the low-hanging fruits, right? Getting you the visibility and wherewithal to understand who your clients are speaking to, what infrastructure they're speaking to. I think that's a very big but low-hanging fruit that, look, you shouldn't be making communications to Japan or Vietnam or Russia, right, wherever it may be. Those are easy to stave off, right, as well as getting visibility around why or what is particularly speaking to those locations. I think the other thing too is the deployability, right, as far as best practice, right? Once you have a set of rules, especially if you're deploying it in multiple environments, getting that kind of base set of foundational rules that you want to redeploy over and over and over again is very easy to do. And again, depending on where you're at as far as maturity and complexity, sometimes just deploying it out there and what we call letting HYAS eat, right? Letting it do its thing for a while, and seeing what you're talking to that way, and what they're blocking natively and what they're tagging as suspicious, and because they're looking at some other things too on the back end here, like is this a English language domain on a Chinese name server, right? Things like that. But it may have a different A record hosted in a different country, right? That's maybe you're doing business with, but there's kind of other back end metadata points are what's the oddities, right? That you need to get your head wrapped around. But as far as deploying it in the environment, no, it's very straightforward. It's as easy as changing a couple IP addresses in the firewall or whatever recursive DNS server you have, or pushing out an agent. You can do that very quickly with things like Intune and stuff like that, or integrating it into already existing tools that you don't have to push an agent in there too. So it really is made to meet you where you're at as far as best practices.
Perfect. Thanks, Todd.
Yep.
Next question. Can you elaborate on how HYAS Protect's domain-based intelligence works at the DNS layer to protect against cyber threats preemptively? And Adam, did you want to take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, looking at the problem set a little bit differently and having access to some pretty unique data sets that allows HYAS to really pull in different kind of telemetry or flags, if you will, that we can start using for that analytics is where we thrive. So domain-based intelligence doesn't, in our world, domain-based intelligence that doesn't mean is this domain bad because it's on a list or because 12 vendors have said it's bad in VirusTotal. Domain-based intelligence means what is the infrastructure it's tied to and what do we know about that infrastructure, even if it's a disparate data set. So for example, we might have host posture data on an IP address, right? So that IP address has port 22 open and 3389 and some others, right? And let's say that you correlate that with a domain that's hosted on that A record IP and it's located in a, Eastern European country. Would you really want unless there's a specific use case for it, natively out of the box, HYAS is probably going to block that because of the behaviors and the characteristics of the infrastructure that's tied to, right? So again, that's really what we talk about when we say domain-based intelligence, is using different data sets that we have access to in that second file panel that we showed to drive the verdicts in a different way. Not because we saw a domain conduct phishing, 3 days ago, but because we have a domain that we know is resolving to an A record or is associated with the same name server that has 40 other domains that historically have been used for phishing, we can now say with a level of confidence that this one probably will too. And so that's really what we mean when we talk about domain-based intelligence.
Perfect. Thanks, Adam. And last question from the audience. RSM has integrated Protective DNS into its security stack. Could you share specific challenges RSM faced before the integration and the benefits they've realized since implementing HYAS Protect?
Yeah, I think, traditionally DNS, at least in my opinion, has been a tough log source to get your hands around sometimes, especially if you ever had to log DNS like off of a domain controller or something like that, or off of a legacy proxy solution. A lot of that data was sometimes hard to integrate, right? So one of the abilities that we had with the HYAS product that solved a lot of that was, again, we have some clients that are very low maturity, some clients that have very complex, DNS architectures, right? We needed to be able to fit somewhere in the middle and be a jack of all trades in that sense. So the ability to integrate across already existing tools, right, either through like an EDR product, like a Defender or SentinelOne, was highly advantageous for us. The second thing was the agent-based deployments, right? Being able to cover mobile and remote workforces, either on or off network. Again, if the endpoint is the most vulnerable, traditionally the most vulnerable source within a corporate environment, and now everyone's working from home. Sometimes they're not on a full tunnel VPN or a split tunnel, or they're off network, right? They could be sitting somewhere else, not doing anything but using a company asset or something of that nature. Being able to cover those assets with the agent is highly advantageous for us as well. Because if we're not able to make those detections, especially when they're off network and we're just relying on network DNS sources, well, that was the problem, right? And then, again, speed to deployment, right? Especially from a DFIR standpoint, being able to get in environments, particularly, again, if clients either have high maturity or low maturity, may not be able to quickly deploy tools, but we can go in or they can go in and change an IP address somewhere, right? So being able to go in there and get speed to deployment, getting telemetry in, starting looking through it, combing through it. That's what we know is known, anomalous or malicious outright, was a big factor for us too, because you can literally deploy it in seconds by changing 2 IP addresses. Those are, I think, some of the challenges we face, and I think that's where we use the product to meet us there and solving some of those challenges.
Perfect. Thanks, Todd. And let me double check to make sure we got no more questions. I believe that was the last one. Perfect timing too. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining today's webinar. Thank you, Todd and Adam, for joining. Definitely love hearing you guys' expertise on this. And we look forward to seeing everybody on our next webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.